Good morning, Miss Wolf's class. We are going to start Revolutionary War on Wednesday. Chapter 1, Wednesday. "Wake up, Jack," Annie whispered. Jack opened his eyes. He looked at his clock. It was 6 a.m. Annie whispered. She was standing at his bedroom door, already dressed. "Now?" said Jack. "Yeah, it's Wednesday. We have to go to the treehouse," she said. "Oh, man, Wednesday," said Jack. Suddenly he was wide awake. "We have to save Camelot," Annie said. I know, said Jack, scrambling out of bed. "Meet you out front," said Annie. Jack quickly changed into his jeans and t-shirt. He threw his notebook and pencil into his backpack. Then he slipped down the stairs and out the front door. Annie was waiting in the gray early light. "All set?" she whispered. "Yep," said Jack. They took off running across their yard. They ran down their quiet street and into Frog Creek Woods. Soon they came to the treehouse. They climbed up the rope ladder. In the early light, they saw Morgan's note, the same note they found on Sunday. Jack picked it up and read aloud. "Dear Jack and Annie, Camelot is in trouble. To save the kingdom, please find these 4 special kinds of writing for my library. Something to follow, something to send, something to learn, and something to lend. Thank you, Morgan." Annie picked up a piece of paper lying on the floor. It was a list of rules from the famous nurse Clara Barton. They had met on their journey to the Civil War. "On Sunday we found the first special writing," said Annie. "Something to follow." "Yeah," said Jack. "And now we need to find the second thing, something to send." He picked up a book laying near the note. The cover showed soldiers on a snowy riverbank. The title was The Revolutionary War. Jack frowned. "Uh-oh," said Annie. "Another war," said Jack. "You still want to go?" said Annie. "We have to," said Jack. "We hated the suffering he'd seen in the Civil War." But they had no choice. They had to help Morgan. He pointed to the cover of the book. "I wish we could go there," Jack said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2, Day or Night. Jack shivered. The wind blew hard. "It's cold," he said. He could see his breath in the air. "Wrap your scarf tighter," said Annie. Jack looked down. He had a wool scarf around his neck. He was also wearing woolen pants that buttoned at the knees, a coat, a hat with 3 corners. On his feet were funny-looking shoes with buckles. In place of his backpack was a leather bag. Annie was wearing a long coat over a long dress. Jack pulled his scarf tighter. Then he looked out the window with Annie. They'd landed in trees near an icy river. The sky was gray and heavy. "It's almost day, or almost night. I can't tell," said Annie. "Yeah, I hope it's almost day," said Jack. "I wonder where we'll find something to send." Jack shrugged. "First we have to find the Revolutionary War," he said. He opened their research book. By the gray light he read, over 200 years ago, the United States was made up of 13 colonies, ruled by the British. From 1775 until 1782, American patriots fought for the independence from Britain. This was called the Revolutionary War. Jack took out his notebook. He wrote, "Americans fight for independence from Britain." Jack turned the page. There was a picture of soldiers in red uniforms. He read aloud, "During the Revolutionary War, British soldiers wore red uniforms. For this reason, they were called redcoats." Jack wrote in his notebook, "British equals redcoats." "Wow, snow," said Annie. Jack looked up from his writing. Annie was holding her hand out the window. A few snowflakes blew into the treehouse. "Not much yet," said Jack, "but we better find the special writing soon." "Well, stop reading and come on," said Annie. She buttoned up her coat and started down the ladder. Okay, said Jack. He packed the research book and his notebook into his bag. Then he followed Annie. When they stepped onto the ground, there were more snow flurries. The sky was growing darker. "I'm afraid it's almost night instead of day," said Jack. "Yeah," said Annie, looking around. "Hey, look, people." She pointed up the river. In the misty distance was a campfire. Several men sat around the fire. They all held muskets. "Maybe they can help us," said Annie. She started away, but Jack grabbed her. "Wait, I think they're soldiers," he said. "They have muskets. Remember the muskets from the Civil War? The guns that the soldiers carried?" "Oh, yeah," said Annie. "They might be redcoats," said Jack. "Let's sneak closer and get a better look at their uniforms." "Quick," said Annie, "before it gets too dark to see." Chapter 3. It's Time. Annie lifted up her long dress and ran to a tree close to the river. Jack held onto his hat and ran after her. They peeked out from behind the tree. More snow flurries swirled in the twilight. "Redcoats?" whispered Annie. "Can't tell," said Jack. In the flickering firelight, the men didn't seem to be wearing uniforms at all. They wore ragged pants and coats. Some even had their feet wrapped in tattered cloths. "Come on," Annie said. She ran to a tree closer to the river. Jack followed. "This is as close as we can get," he whispered, "but we still can't tell what they're wearing," said Annie. She crept forward and hid behind a scraggly bush. "No closer," Jack whispered, but Annie took off again. She crouched behind a rock. She was only about 10 feet from the campfire. "Oh, brother, she's way too close now," Jack thought. But he took a deep breath and ran to the rock. When he joined Annie, she looked at him and grinned. "This is like hide and seek," she whispered. "It's not a game, Annie," Jack whispered back. "It's war. Be serious." "I am serious," said Annie, her voice rising. "Shh," said Jack. But it was too late. One of the men stood up and looked around. "What's the matter, Captain?" another asked. "I heard something," said the captain. He held up his musket. Jack stopped breathing. "Who's there?" the captain shouted. Jack looked at Annie and she shrugged. "We're caught," she whispered. "Who's there?" the captain shouted out again. "Just two kids," Annie answered in a small voice. "Come out and show yourself," the captain said. Jack and Annie stood up from behind the rock. They both held up their hands. "We come in peace," said Annie. In the shadowy twilight, the captain moved towards them. "Who are you?" he asked. "We're Jack and Annie," said Annie. "Why were you spying on us?" he asked. "We weren't spying," said Jack. "We just wanted to know if you were redcoats or patriots." "Which would you like us to be?" the shadowy figure asked. "Patriots," said Jack. "We are patriots," said the captain. "Thank goodness," said Annie. The captain smiled. "Where are you from?" he asked, his voice had softened. "We're visiting relatives nearby," Jack said. "Frog Creek, Pennsylvania," said Annie at the same time. "But that's amazing," the captain said. "My farm is in Frog Creek. Where is your farm?" Jack didn't know how to answer. "It's near the Frog Creek woods," said Annie. "All farms are near the woods," the man said with a laugh. "What?" Just then someone called up from the river. "It's time, Captain." The captain turned to the other men near the campfire. "It's time," he repeated. The soldiers quickly put out their fire. They stood with their muskets on their shoulders. "Time for what, Captain?" Annie said. "To meet up with our commander-in-chief," he said. "Return to your family now, so your mother and father won't worry about you." "Yes, sir," said Jack. "It is nice to see children," the captain said. "I was just trying to write a letter to my own son and daughter. I didn't know what to say to them." "Tell them that you miss them." The man smiled. "And I do, indeed," he said softly. Then he turned and headed up the riverbank. His ragged men followed close behind. Soon they all disappeared in the cold mist. Jack looked around. The wind was blowing harder. The snow was sticking to the ground. "What now?" he said. More than anything, he wanted to go back home. With the soldiers gone, the riverbank felt lonely and scared. "We still have to find something to send," said Annie. "I know. Maybe we should just follow the captain and his men. They might lead us to something." Jack wasn't sure that was a good idea, but he didn't have a better one. "Okay, but let's try not to get caught this time," he said. He and Annie took off through the frozen twilight, following the snowy footprints of the American patriots. Commander-in-Chief. Chapter 4. Jack and Annie ran along the riverbank. The wind whooshed over the cold water. Wet snowflakes hissed in the dark. But then Jack heard other sounds. He heard voices, lots of voices. He and Annie soon came upon hundreds and hundreds of soldiers gathering near the dark river. Many carried oil lanterns. The lanterns gave off an eerie glow in the snowy twilight. "The captain and his men must be here somewhere." Jack looked around. Boats like big canoes were tied near the river. The men were leading horses and loading cannons onto the boats. "What are they all doing?" asked Annie. He pulled out his Revolutionary War book. He read in a whisper. On Wednesday, December 25th, 1776. December 25th? "That's Christmas," said Annie. "Today is Christmas." "Cool," said Jack. He started reading again. On Wednesday, December 25th, 1776, the Patriots were losing the war. Ragged and weary, many were ready to give up. Then something began to happen that turned the war around. About 2,400 American patriots gathered on the west bank of the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. They prepared to cross the river to go on a secret mission. "A secret mission? Oh, man," said Jack. He started to pull out his notebook. "Attention troops, the commander-in-chief," a soldier shouted. Jack and Annie saw a man in a dark cape with a three-cornered hat riding on a white horse. The commander-in-chief loomed above the crowds of soldiers. His cape flapped in the wind. He sat calmly and with dignity on the back of his horse. Even at a distance, Jack thought that the commander-in-chief looked familiar, very familiar, but he couldn't figure out why. "A dangerous mission lies before you all," the man shouted above the wind, "but I want you to have courage. You must remember the words of Thomas Paine." The commander-in-chief held up a piece of paper. He read it to his men. "These are the times that try man's soul. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of men and women. Wow, that's great, whispered Annie. Listening to the powerful words, Jack felt his spirits rise too. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph, the commander-in-chief read on. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. There was silence, as if everyone were thinking about the words the man had read. Then the soldiers started cheering and clapping. They didn't seem tired at all anymore. Now they seemed eager to set out on their mission. The commander-in-chief saluted his men. He steered his horse towards the river. As the horse moved past them, Jack got a better look at the rider. He gasped. Of course, he thought. He had seen that face before, on dollar bills. Jack grabbed Annie's arm. I know who the commander-in-chief is, he explained. It's George Washington. Chapter 5. The Letter. George Washington? Really? Said Annie. Yeah, I think he is, said Jack. Wow, where'd he go? I want to see him again. Come on. She started towards the river. Wait, don't go far, said Jack. I just want to make sure it's him. He opened the Revolutionary War book. He found a picture of the boats on the riverbank. It read, when General George Washington gathered his troops by the Delaware River, he was commander-in-chief of the whole American army. That general led the army for 6 years until America became a free and independent nation. In 1789, he was elected the first president of the new United States. Oh, man, it is him, said Jack. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, General George Washington helped America become independent. Hey, what are you writing? Someone said. Jack looked up. A bearded soldier was pointing at him. Jack shoved the Revolutionary War book and his notebook into his bag. Nothing, sir, he said. He started walking away. The man shouted after Jack, but Jack ran down towards the river and lost himself in a crowd of soldiers. When he looked over his shoulder, he was relieved. The bearded man was nowhere in sight. Stop, young man, someone shone a lantern in Jack's face. Jack gasped. It was the captain. I told you to go home, Jack, the captain said sternly. Where's your sister? Jack looked around. Where was Annie? I don't know, he said. Find her at once and go back to your family, the captain ordered. Our secret mission is very important. Children will only get in the way. Yes, sir, said Jack. The captain started to leave, but he stopped. I wonder if you could do me a favor, Jack, he asked. Sure, said Jack. The captain pulled out a letter. This is my letter to my children, he said. It's a farewell letter. Would you please take it back with you to Frog Creek? Yes, sir, said Jack. You must only send it if you hear that we have failed in our mission and many patriots were lost, said the captain. Yes, sir, said Jack. The captain handed his letter to Jack. I copied the general's speech for my children, the captain said. If anything happens to me, I hope those words will give them courage. The captain then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Good luck, Captain, Jack called. He hoped he would never have to send the letters to the man's children. Suddenly, Jack clutched the letter to his chest. Send, he whispered. This letter was the writing they had been looking for, something to send. He and Annie could go home now. Their mission was over. Jack shoved the captain's letter into his bag. Now he just had to find Annie. As he looked around, he shivered. Where is she? He muttered. He started moving through the crowd looking for Annie. It was hard to see. The wind was blowing harder. The snow fell faster. Jack started to panic. "Annie," he called. As he wove quickly in and out of the crowd, he kept calling for her. None of the soldiers noticed him. They were all too busy. Finally, Jack came to the river. Through the lamplight mist, he saw soldiers waiting to get into the boats. Some had already climbed aboard. "Jack!" came a cry. Jack saw the figure of a small girl. She was sitting in the back of the largest boat. "No way," he whispered. Annie charged down to the boat. He stood on the edge of the water. "What are you doing?" Jack shouted. "This is George Washington's boat," Annie said. "It's our big chance to spend time with him. We might never get another one." Jack looked at the other end of the huge boat. Through the mist and falling snow, he saw the commander-in-chief talking to his crew. "We can't go with him," said Jack. "We'll get in the way of his secret mission. Besides, we have something to send now." "What? How?" said Annie. "A letter. The captain gave me his letter to take back to Frog Creek," said Jack. "We're only supposed to send it if something bad happened to the captain. We can go home now." "Oh, can't we go a little later?" Annie said. Jack climbed into the boat to pull her out. "No, come on," he said, taking her hand. Suddenly the crew moved to the back of the boat, near Jack and Annie. The men grabbed their oars and started pushing the boat away from the shore. "We're taking off," said Annie. "No, we have to get out," Jack said to the rowers. But the men were working too hard to pay attention. They were using their oars to hack up the ice at the edge of the river. "Excuse me," Jack said in a loud voice. Just then, the boat jolted forward. Jack nearly lost his balance. The boat broke through more ice. Rough waves sloshed against its side. "We have to go back," said Jack. "Too late," said Annie. They were headed across the Delaware River. And we will start right here tomorrow.